So for starters, let's talk about our straight A students. Most of these teams are pretty self-explanatory when it comes to the Clippers, Lakers, and Nets. They were able to build these dynamic duos in the NBA. For the Clippers and the Nets, they were not only able to piece together a duo, but also keep intact majority of their supporting cast, which is pretty impressive when you stop to think about it. And then when it comes to the Los Angeles Lakers, even though they missed out on Kawhi Leonard, they still filled out the rest of their roster with some pretty quality role players. I like a lot of those pickups, and more than likely, the Lakers should be a more than competent team, especially since they too have a dynamic duo with AD and LeBron. Then we have the Memphis Grizzlies and the New Orleans Pelicans, who both of these organizations were big winners early on in the offseason, as they both won the NBA lottery, receiving the first and second overall pick, meaning that they were going to be able to hit the restart button on their franchise without having to necessarily give up their two franchise pieces in Anthony Davis and Mike Conley. However, after selecting both Ja Morant and Zion Williamson, not only did that mean that they were able to get new cornerstones, but also trade away both Conley and AD, and in return received even more assets, meaning that the Grizzlies and Pelicans not only have two cornerstones to the rebuilds, but also have possibly the two best young cores in the NBA. And then finally, you have the Utah Jazz, who I believe a lot of people are kind of sort of sleeping on them, but eventually I believe they will be overhyped because that's just how it goes in the NBA. But in one offseason, the Utah Jazz were able to fix a lot of the problems that they had throughout the past year or two, which was get an upgrade at the point guard position in Mike Conley, who I believe is one of the top 7 point guards in the NBA. He is a consistent 17 to 20 point scorer. He's a really good passer, but more importantly, he fits the identity of this team, as he is easily the best defensive star point guard in the NBA. And then after that, they were able to fill out the rest of their roster with Ed Davis at the power forward position, and most notably, they picked up Bojan Bogdanovic, who last year, in the absence of Victor Oladipo, was still a consistent 17 to 20 point scorer while being extremely efficient. The Atlanta Hawks, they were able to piece together a really good young core in this offseason, got 2 draft picks, selected Hunter and Cam Reddish, who I believe will be great fits for these teams. Also in the process, they received some expiring contracts, who more than likely they will unload towards the trading deadline and potentially should receive some valuable assets in return. The only problem that I have with the Hawks is that they didn't really fix any of their defensive problems that they more than likely will suffer from throughout the remainder of the regular season. After that, we have the Miami Heat, who picked up Jimmy Butler. I'm not too fond of him being a max contract player, but I understand why they had to do so. Furthermore, I do like the fact that they traded for KZ, who was a 2nd round pick, who I honestly believe is a massive sleeper in this year's draft class. Also in the process, they got off of that Hassan Whiteside contract, which was pretty disgusting when you actually look at how much money he was getting paid. But the only reason why I don't have Miami as an A is because they obviously have to pair Jimmy Butler with another star, which they have not done that yet to maximize his potential. But until then, I'm going to give them a B. Furthermore, if you think that other star is Chris Paul, don't do that. That would be so problematic. Then we have the Chicago Bulls, another young team that is moving in the right direction. I like the Kobe White, Tom Satoransky, and Thaddeus Young acquisition this offseason. Kobe White in the summer league so far seems like a more willing passer than anticipated, and Thad Young brings some defensive presence that is desperately needed. The only problem that I have with Chicago Bulls is that they don't have any defensive presence on the perimeter, or at least not enough that isn't going to overwhelm Thaddeus Young if he's going to be the only defensive presence on this roster. But nevertheless, Chicago Bulls, like what you're doing, moving in the right direction. Dallas Mavericks, again, like the direction, picked up Seth Curry at a really good price and also brought back Porzingis. However, only reason why they're not an A is because I don't know if Porzingis is a max contract player, and I honestly don't even believe that there is a max contract market out there for Porzingis, especially because we haven't seen him in so long. So then we have the Golden State Warriors, who in my opinion, I would have given them an A. However, they lost Kevin Durant, so that's an obvious step back in talent. But in the process of losing Kevin Durant, they acquired D'Angelo Russell, who they will eventually trade to fill out the rest of their roster. So for the people out there who are just so concerned about how exactly is D'Lo going to fit with Curry, don't worry about it. Furthermore, they waived Sean Livingston and trade Andre Iguodala, which put them pretty close to underneath the luxury tax apron, which is something that they're aiming to do, and I'm pretty sure they're going to waive another player or two to put them underneath the luxury tax apron. And also they brought back Kevon Looney and signed Willie Cauley-Stein Jr. to some pretty team-friendly contracts. So yeah, all around good offseason for the Golden State Warriors. And then finally we have the Indiana Pacers, who are on pace to have a horrific offseason as they lost Corey Joe, Wesley Matthews, Bojan, and Thad Young. And then out of nowhere, Darren Collinson decided to retire. However, they picked up TJ Warren for basically nothing, literally just $1.1 million in cash to the Phoenix Suns. They then signed Jeremy Lamb to a pretty team-friendly contract in my opinion, because I believe he has a lot of upside. And then they also brought in Malcolm Brogdon, who is another player who I believe has a lot of upside to his game, and in my honest opinion was sometimes the second best player on that Milwaukee Bucks team last year, and I believe he fits perfectly on this team, and I believe a backcourt with both him and Victor Oladipo would do wonders for this organization. The only reason why I don't give them an A, however, is because their front court situation is a bit questionable. Personally, I don't have a problem with both Miles Turner and Sabonis in the starting lineup. However, the rest of that roster and the depth in the front court is massively questionable, as they haven't replaced a Thad Young type player yet. When it comes to the Kings, I actually like almost every single last one of their acquisitions. Dwayne Dedmon, Harrison Barnes, Trevor Ariza. However, they overpaid for literally all of them. It's amazing to me how they were able to just give out contracts to players that were not worthy of that much money. Now, when it comes to the Orlando Magic and the Detroit Pistons, they basically stayed the same throughout the entire offseason. Kudos to the Magic for not overpaying Nikola Vucevic, which is amazing to me. However, the Magic still have a point guard problem, and then when it comes to Detroit, it's obvious that they need another star caliber player, but bringing in Derrick Rose and Markieff Morris on very team-friendly contracts is pretty impressive. And again, when it comes to Orlando, they didn't overpay for Vucevic, so kudos to them, just enough to pass my class. When it comes to the Denver Nuggets, I love Jeremy Grant, that acquisition, and I also love the swing at Bol Bol. However, overpaying Jamal Murray on a max contract, yeah, I'm not feeling that whatsoever. Next, we have the Houston Rockets. I talked about this in my previous video, so I'll touch upon them briefly. The acquisition of Russell Westbrook, I'm a fan of, just simply because it is an upgrade at the point guard position and talent alone. Now, I thoroughly understand the fit isn't the greatest because, you know, Russell Westbrook isn't that great of a three-point shooter at all. Also, you have two ball-dominant guards in the backcourt with one another, which I'm not a fan of whatsoever, so there's that problem as well. However, I do believe adding Westbrook on this team will add a different dynamic to the style of play, because I do believe this team needs to be a bit more up-tempo and get some easier looks in transition, which is something that Westbrook excels at. Then when it comes to Milwaukee Bucks, pretty cut and dry. They retained a lot of pieces, added Wesley Matthews. However, they did lose Malcolm Brogdon, and like I stated earlier, in my opinion, throughout certain stretches of the regular season and the playoffs, he was the second best player on this team. And in the process of retaining players, they overpaid Chris Middleton. So there's that problem. And then finally, we have the Philadelphia 76ers, and honestly, I am really torn on this team and what they did to this roster, because on one hand, they could be higher, but on the other hand, this could really get bad really quickly with the amount of money that they have committed to this roster within the last 2 to 3 weeks. So I do like the acquisition of Josh Richardson and Al Horford, as well as retaining Tobias Harris, which with those 3 players alone, I think defensively this team will be a bit more well-rounded, because no one is a fan on JJ Redick on the defensive end, and Al Horford gives you a bit more flexibility in the front court, especially with giving Embiid some rest on the bench, and you can just slide Al Horford to the 5. And I'm pretty sure there's going to be a lot of people who are concerned with Ben Simmons and his involvement with this offense, as more than likely he's going to be utilized on ball more often. However, I don't have a problem with it, and I would actually go as far as saying it's necessary for this team, because the only way that this team has a real chance of winning a championship and building a dynastic run is if Ben Simmons becomes a bit more involved offensively and continues to develop as a scorer with the ball in his hands. So I have no problem with it at all. However, on the flip side of things, obviously Ben Simmons can't shoot, so that's something that we cannot deny. Furthermore, the type of money that they've thrown at Tobias Harris and Al Horford is a bit excessive. And as much as I love Tobias, he's definitely not a near max contracts player. And then when it comes to Ben Simmons, they're looking at giving him an extension, which is also fairly concerning. So the type of money that this team has committed to themselves, yeah, it's a bit excessive. And with that amount of money committed within just those 4 to 5 players, that means yet again that this team will not have a quality bench, which in my opinion was possibly their second or third biggest problem in last year's postseason, as Embiid was playing a ridiculous amount of minutes and they were only in the second round. But then again, even if the Sixers just stay packed, I still think that's going to be good for a team that honestly could have made it out of the Eastern Conference. The Spurs really didn't do much of anything, and honestly, I believe they overpaid Rudy Gay. However, I do like Trey Lyles and DeMarre Carroll on this roster. Then we have the Portland Trail Blazers, who lost Aminu, Mo Harkless, and Seth Curry, which in my opinion will be massive blows because the depth of the Portland Trail Blazers really carried them during certain games in the playoffs all the way to the conference finals. Furthermore, picking up Hassan Whiteside, I'm not the biggest fan of his, even though I do understand that it was a necessity because Nurkic more than likely will be out for majority of the regular season. However, I will give credit where credit is due. They signed back Rodney Hood to a team-friendly deal. And also, I believe swapping Evan Turner for Kent Bazemore is an upgrade because Evan Turner really wasn't giving them much of anything, and Kent Bazemore just feels like a better fit for this team. Then when it comes to Minnesota, they moved up in the draft to get Culver. If they didn't do that, I would have given this team an F because they really didn't do anything. They actually lost Dario Saric as well during that process, and they didn't really fill in the power forward spot. So I don't know who's going to be their starting power forward in this upcoming season. And then when it comes to Boston, they lost Kyrie Irving, Terry Rozier, Al Horford, and Marcus Morris. Oh yeah, then Aaron Baines as well. So yeah, lost 5 quality players. So their bench depth has been cut in half basically, and the remaining of their bench is questionable at best. Furthermore, when it comes to what they did to fill out the rest of their starting 5, they added in Kemba Walker, which is the only reason why I'm not giving them an F, and then Enes Kanter at the 5 spot, which is laughable on the defensive end. The Raptors lost Kawhi Leonard, so I'm pretty sure that explains itself. The Charlotte Hornets not only lost Kemba Walker and Jamie Lamb, but they overpaid for Terry Rozier in a sign-in trade. Again, speaks for themselves. The Cavaliers really haven't done anything, so they're still going to be a luxury tax team that won't be anywhere near close to making the playoffs. Not only that, they drafted another guard after selecting one the year prior. Then you have the Oklahoma City Thunder, who lost 2 top 15 players, and even though, yes, they got a boatload of draft picks, the odds of them drafting anywhere near close to that type of talent level is slim to none, especially a player like Russell Westbrook, who is a top 50 player of all time. The Washington Wizards literally did nothing but lose players, valuable pieces at that, such as Bobby Portis and Jabari Parker. Sorry, I drew a blank there. And then finally, we have the Phoenix Suns and the New York Knicks, which I'm pretty sure they speak for themselves as well, but let's just go a little bit deeper into both of those teams. The Phoenix Suns start off the offseason trading away TJ Warren, which was pretty questionable. And then they also traded away a draft pick in that process as well, which is also questionable. But they received cash, which only amounted to $1.1 million, which was just completely outrageous. But then a lot of people were just assuming, hey, maybe they're making some cap space room for, an acquisition at the point guard position. A lot of people were rumoring D'Angelo Russell. It turned out to be Ricky Rubio. So there's that. I do like the Dario Saric acquisition if he was a solid defender, which he isn't. So there's that problem as well. And then finally, after losing TJ Warren, they decided to bring back Kelly Oubre on a 2-year, $30 million contract, which doesn't make any sense because TJ Warren makes $35 million over the course of the next 3 years. So basically, you brought back another player very similar to TJ Warren. However, he gets paid more money than TJ Warren. So yeah, none of that made any sense whatsoever. And then you selected Cameron Johnson way too high in this year's draft class. So that's all problematic, and I don't know what the heck the Phoenix Suns are doing. And then finally, you have the New York Knicks, who not only have put themselves in a situation to be the biggest losers in this year's offseason, but potentially will cap off this 20-year stretch with an amazing feat of yet again not acquiring any major free agents, but then turning around and overpaying for players who play the exact same position, which is something that is the most Knickiest thing to do. But acquiring Julius Randle, I thought, okay, that's a pretty good way to bounce back, and you gave him a fairly reasonable contract that I believe is tradable. But then you turn around and got Bobby Portis, okay, Marcus Morris, Okay, and Taj Gibson. 3 more power forwards. So again, I don't know what you're doing. But with all that being said, people, please let me know what you think about the video in the comment section below. All of my gradings on all of these teams. And even if you want to, you can give me your gradings for the teams as well, and especially the ones that you disagree with me on. But with all that being said, I'll see you all later. Peace.